I'm going to call the meeting to order as small technical difficulties. A meeting of the Planning and Economic Development Committee was held today, Monday, April 10th at 7:03 p.m. in the Aldermanic Chamber. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Derek Theobald is absent. Alderman Elijah Ben Clemens is present. Alderman June Karen is absent. Alderman Elijah Michael O'Brien is present. Alderman Elijah Melvin Moran.
Present.
Present. And also in attendance is Alderman Tom Lopez and Tim Cummings of the Community Development still, or?
Administrative Services.
Administrative Services, thank you. And Mr. Sullivan of Community Development. Okay, yes, okay, got to. Thank you.
With that, we'll open the public hearing for O23-043, amending the zoning map by rezoning portions of the Veterans Memorial Parkway, Interval Street and Hewley Street, and land situated west of the Veterans Memorial Parkway to C Urban Residence R-C District. Is there anyone wishing to testify in favor?
We need a
I'm sorry.
a description of what we're.
Oh, yes. Isn't that what I just read off? The description?
No, like we need an explanation of the legislation.
Oh, Director Sullivan?
Yeah.
Do you want to give an explanation of the, my apologies. Feels like we just did this. Formalities.
Formality.
Good evening, members of the committee. Matt Sullivan, Community Development Director. Happy to provide a brief overview, and I know we've had some significant discussions. These two pieces of legislation before you this evening for public hearing are related to the Mohawk Tannery redevelopment, and specifically the land use portions of that redevelopment effort. The first, O2343, is simply an amendment to the zoning map to actually rezone portions of the Mohawk Tannery redevelopment site to Urban Residence RC District, so simply a zoning map change, taking it from the existing zoning and putting it into that RC District, allowing the dimensional controls and other constraints of that zone to be applied to the redevelopment. The second, and perhaps the more substantial, is the installation of a new overlay district over the tannery area. So this will go over the RC zoning that's actually in place and will be expanded. This overlay district includes several dimensional use and other requirements and constraints that will guide the redevelopment of the development plan in earnest, and includes some detailed text about what the overlay is intended to achieve and all of the controls intended to drive towards that outcome. I do believe that Attorney Brad Westgate is here to provide a brief overview of the amendments that are before you this evening specifically, but happy to answer any questions that the committee might have as the proceedings go forward this evening. Thank you.
Any questions for Director Sullivan? No? All right, now we'll open up testimony in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Brad Westgate. I'm a lawyer with Weiner Bennett at 402 Amherst Street in Nashua, representing Blaylock Holdings LLC, which is the prospective developer of the tannery site. I'll just get up one time, Mr. Chairman, if I may, both addressing Ordinance O2343, which has to do with the rezoning legal description, and Ordinance O2344, which involves the overlay district, as Mr. Sullivan described. So just very briefly, there are the amendments that pertain to O2343, the legal description of the land being rezoned, are corrective amendments, meaning correcting legal description errors in the first batch of data that we gave the city to prepare the initial draft of these ordinances. The land being rezoned, as the committee will recall, March 21st meeting when we presented this in detail, and the committee had quite a number of questions and good discussion was held, essentially is to rezone part of the Parkway right-of-way, the so-called Fimble property, map 71 lot 1, and a couple or a few little pieces of land at the ends of Huey and Intervale Street to RC District, as Mr. Sullivan said. The amendments to O2344 amend text in the overlay district language itself. And what happened there was, the committee will recall, we had some discussion in some detail on March 21 regarding that. There were 3 amendments to text, 2 of which generated from Alderman Jetty's comments that evening. One of those, the first of those two pertains to the 20,000 square feet of non-residential use that would may be permitted under the overlay district for the totality of the development area. The clarification basically is to make it certain that the 20,000 square feet is a cumulative cap on the entire non-residential uses for the entire overlay district of roughly 41 acres. The second amendment through Alderman Jenny's discussion pertained to accessory uses, and the idea was to do a better tie-in to the accessory use reference in the table of uses in the land use code, as well as make clear that accessory uses are incidental and subordinate to principal uses, but they can be accessory to a particular principal use on the whole tannery site, not just one on a particular lot. The basic idea of an accessory use is it's incidental to a principal use on the specific lot, because there's going to be different lots in the tannery development. The idea is to let the accessory uses conceivably pertain to a principal use on a different lot. And the last amendment was simply one that we proposed, which was to enable our planning board applications to be submitted prior to the master development agreement and master concept plan being approved by the Board of Aldermen, but rather, so long as those have been submitted to the Board of Aldermen for consideration, we could then go to the planning board. So in sum, we would just respectfully submit, Mr. Chairman, that these proposed ordinances are in order. The amendments make sense. They're a good outcropping of what was discussed before this committee a couple of weeks ago. So you'll remember there's actually a third ordinance before you, which was tabled 2 weeks ago, and that pertained to the actual creation of the overlay district in terms of making it a zone itself, the overlay zone. So you have three things before you tonight. The two ordinances being amended, the third to create the landmass that constitutes the overlay district, and then the resolution to favorably approve, we would hope, the master concept plan. So we're hoping that the committee could give the Board of Aldermen an oral recommendation favorably approving the three proposed ordinances and the resolution approving the master concept plan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right, testimony in opposition. Seeing none, testimony in favor. Seeing none, testimony in opposition. Seeing none, the public hearing for O23-043 was declared closed at 7:10 p.m. I'll open the public hearing for O23-044 at 7:10 p.m. I believe we got an overview of that by Director Sullivan as well. And we heard testimony in favor of both of these earlier. So any additional testimony in favor? Testimony in opposition? Testimony in favor? Testimony in opposition? Seeing none, the public hearing for O23-044 was closed at 7:11 p.m. All right. We'll open the regular meeting at 7:11 p.m. Will the clerk please recall the roll?
Alderman Derek Tebow is absent. Alderman Elijah Ben Clemens.
Here.
Alderman June Karen, absent. Alderman Elijah Michael O'Brien is present. Alderman Elijah Melvin Warren.
Here.
And also in attendance is Alderman Tom Lopez. Also in attendance is Tim Cummings, Matt Sullivan, and Attorney Brad Wingate.
All right. Anyone from the public wishing to speak on anything that's going to be acted on tonight? Seeing none. Discussion? There is none. Communications.
We have two communications, one from Sam Durfee, Planning Director. Reason, referral from the Board of Aldermen of proposed ordinance 0-23-043, amending the zoning map by rezoning portions of the Veterans Memorial Parkway, Interville Street and Huey Street, and the land situated west of the Veterans Memorial Parkway to C Urban Residence R-C District. Also from Mr. Sam Durfee, Planning Director. Reason, referral from the Board of Aldermen on proposed ordinance 0-23-044, establishing the Veterans Memorial Parkway redevelopment overlay district.
There being no objection, I'll accept these communications and place them on file. Unfinished business.
There is none.
No, there
Alderman
is.
O'Brien, do you have a motion?
Yes, I would like to make the motion to amend the zoning map by rezoning portions of the Veterans Memorial Parkway, Intervale Street and Huey Street, and land situated west of the Veterans Memorial Parkway to C, urban residence, R-C district, and that is ordinance 0-23-043 as amended.
Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you. Also before us this evening is ordinance 0-23-044, establishing the Veterans Memorial Parkway redevelopment overlay district. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Alderman O'Brien?
Also before us this evening is ordinance 0-23-047, amending the land use code regarding the minor site plans amendments to permit seasonal outdoor dining approvals. I would like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
That is the motion. Brief discussion on the motion. I misunderstood the directors that presented the previous PEDC. I thought we were just eliminating the annual renewal fee. And that I was okay with that. And I thought we were keeping in place the $300 fee for initial assessments. I have come now to know that that had been suspended during the pandemic to assist restaurants that are not downtown in stabilizing during the pandemic. And I misrepresented that to a couple of aldermen prior to last week's the last full board meeting. And that discussion ended up with it being referred back here because there were quite a few aldermen who weren't okay with the initial fee being permanently removed. Did I get that right, Director Sullivan? Yes. And do you mind just coming back up and just, so we had a brief conversation that if we were to pass this as presented, it would just eliminate all fees essentially, and no renewal fees, no anything, no initial fees. We did have a brief conversation before the meeting that maybe a $25 fee just in general for renewal would be okay with your department, and that actually might make more revenue for the city over time than one initial fee based on the limited amount of restaurants that utilize that. Does that sound correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It does indeed, and I do want to apologize for maybe being unclear about what the intent of this legislation was as part of our prior discussions, but you're absolutely correct that we are comfortable recommending a nominal fee as a replacement for the initial $300 application fee. One fee that's been discussed is perhaps $25 on an annual basis, and that would actually be codified within this ordinance. Happy to answer any questions on that or discuss that number. I'll be frank, it's a bit arbitrary, but I do recognize that anything greater than $50 would be a substantial fee over a short period of time, and so that's why the recommendation to consider the $25 instead.
All right, so I'll make a motion to amend to change the fee for annual renewal to $25. Any discussion on that motion? Alderman Clemmons?
Yeah, so is your motion, is it an annual renewal or is it include the initial renewal too in your motion?
So my understanding is that the initial is no longer there. So this would just be an annual $25 fee for the application process, re-approving the application.
So you're motioning to have a annual fee of $25 for this?
Right.
Okay. Can I speak to that?
Of course.
Thank you. So I won't be supporting that. I understood the legislation perfectly last time. that there was not going to be a fee. I don't think that there should be a fee for this particular application. I just don't see the need for it. It's not a revenue, it's not a significant revenue source. $25 over 20 restaurants that maybe do this is not a significant revenue source for the city. The department's already represented the fact that previously at the previous meeting that it's not an overly burdensome process. And I just think that we're doing a disservice to our restaurants when we're asking them to do this. So for me, I think I'm going to stick with the original vote that I made.
Thank you. Director Sullivan, the $300 initial fee, was that temporarily waived or permanently waived during the pandemic?
It was temporarily waived during the pandemic.
And does any action that we're taking, when would it restart? Or is just this will permanently remove that $300 fee?
This will permanently remove that $300 fee. What I would suggest for an amendment to maybe provide some clarity to your question, Mr. Chair, is that the existing language would still read that the outdoor dining minor site plan would be exempt from the fees required under 190-267A3. That's the $300 fee, the one-time $300 fee. But I would then insert a comment there saying with the exception of a $25 annual permitting fee. So they would be exempt still from the $300. It would simply be a recurring $25 fee that would be applied. That would be applied upon the first request this year and in subsequent years until the code is amended, if it is.
So I'm going to withdraw my motion and then ask you to restate that.
Sure. So the recommendation, should the committee choose to move forward with this, would be to maintain the language as presented here, the exception that it would read following 192-67A3, there would be a comma, and it would read with an annual $25 permitting fee, and I would leave it at that.
That's my motion.
Okay.
Any discussion on that motion? Alderman Lopez.
Through the chair to Director Sullivan, do you have any idea how many restaurants apply for this?
I do, and I'm happy you asked, Alderman Lopez. So during sort of prime COVID years, we were seeing about 25 applicants. We've seen that diminish a bit down to 16 and now 12 in our last year. So we're seeing diminishing numbers, but we've already had 4 inquiries this year from restaurants that are seeking to establish some outdoor dining on their private property. So there's a small but consistent group of applicants to this program.
Is that, you all said Alderman Lopez?
Just as a follow-up, do you happen to know how many paid the original fee before COVID?
None. In fact, this program was not offered prior to COVID. This was an adjustment in response to COVID. So these applicants have not paid a $300 fee. They've in fact not paid any fees for these outdoor dining approvals.
It's getting better and better. I understand the argument from other aldermen. I think it was Alderman Jetting, for example, last meeting. I can't get my plumbing installation fees waived and all various basic, the basic arguments on stuff like this. So I can understand that perception. I'm always okay with an initial fee. I don't particularly like fees in general. I consider them another tax. But I think I'm okay with voting yes on my motion that I just made, just out of compromise for other members of the board who have spoken to me about it and how they had felt about it at the full board meeting. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I do want to maybe clarify with the language. I'm sorry you made a motion. I may have to ask you to clarify that motion, but I'm sort of making this up on the fly to some extent. What I believe it should say is, in fact, with the exception of a $25 annual permitting fee. That would be the language that would be proposed after 192-67A3, with the exception of a $25 annual permitting fee.
I'm going to withdraw my motion, and if you could restate it again.
Yes, so after 192-67A3, comma, with the exception of a $25 annual permitting fee.
That's my motion, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything, Alderman O'Brien? Bite at the apple?
No, I would just ask a favor of the clerk, to Mr. Sullivan, if we could, I see you afterwards, we'll write that down verbatim.
Of course.
To make it legal. Thank you.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay?
The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Where are we?
Unfinished.
Unfinished business.
Oh, no, we
Just
have to.
amended.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we have to vote on the entire thing.
Oh, yes, as amended.
Alderman Bryan, do you have a motion?
Yes. My motion is to recommend final passage of O23-047 as amended.
Any further discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Unfinished business.
There is none?
New business resolutions.
There is none.
Tabled in committee.
We have a motion. I would like to make a motion to remove from the table R-23-088.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. Alderman O'Brien.
Before us this evening and removed from the table is R-23-088, approving the master concept plan for the Mohawk Tannery redevelopment. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
That is the motion. Any, Director Sullivan or comments, any statements on this before we, no, discussion? Alderman Lopez.
I have questions for probably Director Sullivan, if you wouldn't mind.
Director Sullivan, do you mind?
So, two questions. The first was, my understanding was that this had to go before the planning board for approval of this, before the aldermen were going to vote on it. And I thought that was what was represented at the community meeting, so I just wanted to clarify that. But then additionally, it's my understanding, if this is the document, I think it is, that if the master planning document is submitted to the planning board, at that point we cannot make legislation affecting it?
So I think this went back in front of the planning board last week, or the same meeting as the asphalt plan.
Yes.
So, but I'll let you answer the second part. of the question.
So that is correct. This was on re-referral was considered by the planning board at the meeting last week. Alderman Lopez, could you just clarify that second question? I'm not sure if I totally understood that.
My understanding is that once something is presented to the planning board, we're not supposed to make legislation that would affect that until the planning board has completed either approval or rejection?
Yes, so specifically the trigger there is the submission of a site plan or a subdivision application to the planning board. Those actions actually haven't taken place just yet. These fundamental land use pieces of legislation need to be in place before that application is actually made to the planning board. It's anticipated that those applications might be made as early as late April, but these pieces of legislation most likely and hopefully will be in place at that point in time, so that conflict that you're talking about is a real one, but it shouldn't be impacted if these are approved by the Board of Aldermen.
Okay, if I may follow.
Go ahead.
I just want to make 100% sure we're being crystal clear to the neighbors, because
Yep.
this is their home. They're very, very diligent about looking into this, and I want to make sure that there isn't any miscommunications about when meetings are or that type of things. I do believe most of the neighborhood is supportive of this, but I also want to respect the ones who have reservations. It's not what they're looking for, and I want to make sure they have the chance to voice those, especially if they're planning to do it at the planning board.
Yes, Alderman Lopez, it's a great point, and that's exactly right. These conversations that we're having as part of these pieces of legislation are just about creating the regulatory framework. There will be several subsequent meetings at the planning board where abutters and interested parties will have an opportunity to comment directly on the design. These are really just setting the basic parameters for what that plan will look like and what the redevelopment will look like. Many more opportunities for folks in the community to weigh in.
As one last follow-up.
Of course, go ahead.
Would it be possible to update the either community development or economic development to put like any kind of a heads up that these are the remaining steps ahead and this is what we're planning, so that we could direct residents to that and say, all right, this is where we are and this is what's coming up?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think what may be in order, and I'll have to have a further discussion with Director Cummings, but we've actually had some contemplation of a sort of a project website talking about this. It's a little bit strange just based on the status of the legislation that's before us right now and the fact that a planning board application is pending, but it's not unheard of. We've done something like that for the asphalt plant that's currently pending as well. So perhaps through a project website of that type, we could at least put up basic information about when community meetings are taking place. I think that's a great comment.
Okay, definitely would appreciate that. Thank you
Okay.
for the board's indulgence as well.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez and Director Sullivan. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make a motion to remove from the table ordinance 0-23-045, which is amending the zoning map by adding the Veterans Memorial Parkway redevelopment overlay district.
All those in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, it's removed from the table. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make a motion to recommend final passage of 023-045.
Great. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Nay. The motion passes. All right, general discussion. Seeing none. Public comment. Seeing none. Remarks by the Alderman. Alderman O'Brien.
Yeah, I just want to briefly say that very excited about this Mohawk since my involvement with the fire department. I did 35 years of service, and it always had been an eyesore to that particular neighborhood. And I think this is a good deal. I welcome Mr. Westgate and his other principals being partners with this. I think it will go a long way into enhancing an area that I wouldn't really say that was blighted, but it's time to move on from the tannery into something more positive for the city. So I think this is fantastic.
I concur with Alderman O'Brien. Also, I attended the opening the Performing Arts Center with my daughter Violet, and then later on my wife. I just swapped off, but it was a great, everyone else was here as well. It was a great event. The performances were fantastic and the place looks great. Good job to Director Cummings for leading that effort for the city. I'm sure Director Sullivan had his hand in that at some point. He's shaking his head to take credit. No, he's actually, Director Cummings is too humble, you know. Any other comment before we go?
I want to echo your thoughts with the Performing Arts Center. Another great enhancement to the downtown. And if anybody happens to find a hearing aid, please let me know. You know.
Alderman Lopez.
Just a plug for anyone from Ward 4 who's watching because of the tannery thing. We have an election on May 16th to elect our state representatives, so go to Lead Street and vote, please.
The last thing I'll say about the Performing Arts Center, my wife and I left to go get like an early lunch, late lunch, early dinner, and all of downtown was just packed. We went all the way down to the across from Peddler's, a new barbecue place, the pig something.
Hidden Pig.
Yes, and it was just packed. You can only get seating at the bar. So that's the distance of the impact that the opening had on the restaurants downtown. So it was great. Couldn't get in anywhere else really. So we had to walk a little bit further, but we were able to get some spots at the bar. But other than that, it was a great day for the city of Nashville. All right, Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
That is in order. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, and we are closed. The ayes have it. We're closed at 7:31 p.m.